내 곁에 있어줘 내게 머물러줘 네 손을 잡은 나 놓치지 말아줘 이렇게 네가 한 걸음 멀어지면 내가 한 걸음 더 가면 되잖아 그런 위로도 나의 줄 수 없지만 아무런 희망도 내 되어줄 수 없지만 그냥 함께 가보자 어떤 길이라도 나와 함께 가줄래
In our headlines on this Tuesday, April 28th, here in South Korea, President Lee Jae-myung pledges to promote partnership with the Global South as part of efforts to ease over-dependence on specific regions and to broaden options to ensure national interests. Meanwhile, the U.S. and Iran clash over the Strait of Hormuz during a UN Security Council session on maritime security on Monday, with the U.S. calling for a multilateral coalition to restore freedom of navigation. And the 31-year-old man who opened fire at the Washington Hilton at the start of an annual dinner for White House correspondents attended by U.S. President Donald Trump has been charged with attempted assassination of the American president. We start here on the national front, where President Lee Jae-myung has highlighted the importance of diversifying South Korea's diplomatic portfolio following his recent state visits to India and Vietnam. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin reports.
President Lee Jae-myung has stressed the need to broaden South Korea's diplomatic outreach to the global South following his recent trip to India and Vietnam.
변화의 물결 속에서 안정적 성장 동력을 확보하려면 특정 지역에 대한 지나친 의존도를 낮추고 우리의 선택지를 꾸준히 늘려가는 전략적이고 유연한 국익 실용 외교가 절실합니다.
Chairing his first cabinet meeting since the trip on Tuesday, President Lee said the war in the Middle East is reshaping the global economic and security landscape and called for a more strategic and flexible diplomatic approach. Tuesday's meeting reviewed the outcomes of Lee's state visits with a particular focus on strengthening economic ties with India.
어쨌든 미국, 유럽, 중국에 편중돼 있는 게 현실인데, 저는 인도는 지금 세계에서 제일 인구도 많고 14억 6천인가 7천만이라고. 근데 이게 이제 기업들이 독자적으로 진출하기에 초기에는 부담이 사실은 있는데 이 정부 간 협력이 되게 크게 도움되잖아요.
Lee's summit with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi resulted in an agreement to establish a ministerial-level Korea-India Industrial Cooperation Committee, along with an MOU to support cooperation between the two countries' small and medium-sized enterprises.
In the case of our ministry, one deputy director covers 5 to 6 countries, including India. Despite India's importance, our current institutional capacity remains limited. We need to strengthen our governance framework to reflect India's strategic significance.
At the same time, President Lee underscored the importance of maintaining stable ties with traditional partners. He urged resolving pending issues based on mutual respect and shared principles while building forward-looking relationships. The president didn't mention specific countries, but the remarks come after the U.S. reportedly restricted intelligence sharing with Seoul on North Korea following the unification minister's disclosure of the regime's nuclear facility in Kusong. 송유진, Arirang News.
The National Assembly's April session has come to a close after a rare bipartisan push for economic relief, and attention now is on a high-stakes constitutional vote in May and the local elections in June. Our political correspondent Moon Hae-ryun reports.
The National Assembly's extraordinary session for April ended on Tuesday after a rare burst of bipartisan lawmaking despite weeks of intense political confrontation. Lawmakers approved a 26.2 trillion won supplementary budget aimed at easing the pressure on people from inflation and high energy prices linked to the conflict in the Middle East. The package includes direct relief payments for lower-income households, with the first round of applications and payouts already underway, alongside fuel cost support, transport discounts, and supply chain assistance. With the April session now over, attention is rapidly shifting to a major constitutional reform vote in May. National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik is urging the Conservative People Power Party to allow its lawmakers a free vote on the proposal. If passed, it would mark South Korea's first constitutional amendment since 1987. The proposed changes would formally recognize the democratic legacy of the May 18th Gwangju democratization movement, strengthen parliamentary control over martial law declarations, and add the state's responsibility for balanced regional development. To pass, the bill needs support from at least 197 of the Assembly's 295 lawmakers. Reform supporters currently have 187 signatories, meaning they need opposition backing. The People Power Party has opposed the move, citing concerns over possible future debate on presidential term limits. Supporters say the current constitution already blocks any extension of a sitting president's term. The political focus is also shifting to the June 3rd local elections now just weeks away. The DP hopes to build on recent policy momentum, while the PPP faces internal divisions over leadership and campaign strategy. Several races in cities such as Busan and Daegu are expected to test whether long-standing regional voting patterns are beginning to shift. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, a reshuffling in the ranking of equity markets worldwide is reportedly underway as AI demand elevates South Korea's standing past a major European counterpart. Our economics correspondent Kim Jun-hong reports.
Korea has overtaken the UK to rank as the world's 8th largest stock market, driven by a strong rally in AI-related tech heavyweights. Bloomberg reported Tuesday that the total market capitalization of Korean-listed firms has jumped more than 45% this year to around $4.04 trillion. This far outpaces the UK, which has seen only a roughly 3% rise to $3.99 trillion. Until the end of 2024, the UK market was about twice as large as Korea's, but sharp gains this year have quickly reversed that. Bloomberg attributed the surge to strong gains in AI-driven chip stocks. The report highlighted industry leaders Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, noting that the two memory chip giants now account for more than 40% of the benchmark Kospi.
Korea's stock market has long traded below what its economic size would suggest, but the recent rally has brought it closer to fair value. Gains are being supported by a resilient AI-driven semiconductor cycle.
Another expert says policy efforts to ease the so-called Korea discount are also helping drive the rally.
Since March, a push for share buybacks and stronger shareholder returns has helped stabilize the market. Combined with rapid earnings growth, the Kospi has shown a clear outperformance against global peers.
Meanwhile, the Kospi continued its upward rally Tuesday, finishing at 6,641.02, up 0.39% from the previous close. At one point in the session, the index rose to 6,712.73, topping the previous intraday high in the 6,600 range set just a day earlier, and moving above the 6,700 mark for the first time. The rally moved in line with gains on Wall Street. Overnight, major U.S. indexes closed at record highs, lifted by optimism of strong big tech earnings, despite ongoing uncertainty over ceasefire talks between Washington and Tehran. Kim Jun-hong, Arirang News.
The Bank of Korea's net profit hit an all-time high in the first quarter of this year. The cumulative net profit stood over 4.2 trillion won, or some $2.9 billion, up 3 times the amount from the first quarter of last year. The gains were garnered amid a persistently high exchange rate that averaged over 1,461 to the dollar throughout the first quarter, boosting returns on the bank's foreign currency securities and overseas asset management. The record earnings are expected to benefit government revenues as the central bank is required by law to transfer a significant portion of its annual profit to the national treasury. U.S. and Iranian ambassadors to the UN locked horns over the Strait of Hormuz during a session on maritime security on Monday, while Iran's top diplomat was in Moscow for talks with Russia's Vladimir Putin. Our Lee Seung-jae has the latest.
The U.S. ambassador to the United Nations is calling for a multinational coalition to restore safe navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, accusing Iran of unlawfully disrupting one of the world's most vital shipping routes. Addressing a UN Security Council session on maritime security, Mike Waltz stressed that global waterways must remain open and cannot be controlled by any single nation, warning that Tehran is using the strait as a geopolitical leverage with far-reaching consequences. In response, Iran's ambassador to the United Nations, Amir Saeed Iravani, asserted Iran's sovereignty, particularly in the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz. He emphasized that Iran is not bound by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, except for provisions recognized as customary international law.
Iran is not a party to the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Accordingly, it is not bound by its treaty-based provisions except to the extent that specific rules reflected therein are universally recognized as customary international law.
At the same time, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi suggested a shift in tone, saying Tehran is considering negotiations. He argued that despite the United States' global power, Washington failed to achieve its objectives in the conflict, prompting renewed calls for dialogue. Araghchi made the remarks during a visit to St. Petersburg for talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin said he hoped Iran would overcome what he called a difficult period and that peace should ultimately prevail.
Of course, we very much hope that based on this courage and will for independence, the Iranian people will, under the leadership of a new leader, make it through this difficult period of trials and that peace will follow.
Russia has positioned itself as a potential mediator in the crisis, following U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran that Moscow has strongly condemned. It has also proposed storing Iran's enriched uranium as a way to ease tensions, though Washington has not accepted the offer. The growing alignment between Moscow and Tehran comes amid deepening strategic ties. The two countries signed a 20-year partnership agreement last year, and Russia is currently constructing additional nuclear reactors at Iran's Bashir facility, the country's only nuclear power plant. Araghchi reaffirmed that cooperation between the two nations will continue to expand, and thanked Moscow for its ongoing support. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And the man who reportedly opened fire at the venue of an annual dinner for White House correspondents attended by U.S. President Donald Trump has been charged with attempted assassination of the American president. Our Kim Do-yeon has more.
The suspect in the shooting at the White House Correspondents Association dinner has been charged with the attempted assassination of U.S. President Donald Trump and could face life in prison. On Monday local time, the U.S. Department of Justice formally indicted Cole Thomas Allen.
Today, the Department of Justice filed 3 federal charges in United States District Court against Cole Thomas Allen. The first count is attempted assassination of the President of the United States. This count is punishable by up to life in prison.
Allen faces 2 additional charges: the interstate transportation of a firearm to commit a felony and the discharge of a firearm during a crime of violence in what U.S. prosecutors called a premeditated attack. Officials confirmed Allen traveled across state lines from California and positioned himself just 1 floor above the ballroom where the president was attending the event. He was apprehended carrying a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun, a .38 caliber semi-automatic handgun, and at least 3 knives. The White House swiftly condemned the attack, pointing to a newly discovered manifesto written by the suspect that detailed a clear intent to inflict massive harm on the president and other administration officials.
This political violence stems from a systemic demonization of him and his supporters by commentators, yes, by elected members of the Democrat Party, and even some in the media.
The shooting triggered a security emergency in Washington, with the breach coming as the United States prepares to host a series of major public events and large-scale gatherings to celebrate the 250th anniversary of its founding. To address vulnerabilities, White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles is convening an urgent meeting early this week with top leadership from the Department of Homeland Security and the Secret Service to completely overhaul protection protocols for the upcoming national celebrations. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
A proposed U.S. missile defense system looks to move from plan to action as the Pentagon reaffirms the potential threats from countries like North Korea. And speaking of the northern regime, South Korea's top nuclear envoy has also sounded a similar alarm. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung has details.
Mark Berkowitz, the U.S. Assistant Secretary of War for Space Policy, has said the Golden Dome, a next-generation air and missile defense system, is necessary to protect the U.S. homeland from military threats posed by North Korea, China, and Russia. This came from written testimony submitted ahead of a Senate Armed Services Committee subcommittee hearing on Monday local time. While highlighting that Washington's competitors are expanding, diversifying, and increasing the sophistication of their missile and air capabilities, Berkowitz said that building a comprehensive next-generation air and missile defense system is essential to strengthening deterrence and defending the home country. He specifically named China, North Korea, and Russia, saying these countries are expanding their nuclear and missile forces. Especially regarding North Korea, he pointed out how the regime continues to enhance its nuclear, missile, and air weapons capabilities, posing a direct and growing threat to the U.S. He added that North Korea's full range of missiles threatens American, South Korean, and Japanese territory, while its ICBMs are capable of striking the U.S. mainland. Meanwhile, South Korea's top nuclear envoy underlined the need to resolve the North Korean nuclear issue, calling it the most urgent challenge to the non-proliferation regime. During his keynote speech at the 11th Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Conference held in New York on Monday local time, Chung Hyun-do, Vice Foreign Minister for Diplomatic Strategy and Intelligence, said that Pyongyang was the only case of a country that benefited from the NPT regime, but which then declared a withdrawal and continues to openly develop nuclear weapons. He added that it remains the most pressing challenge to the non-proliferation regime. He also urged Russia to stop its illegal military cooperation with the North. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
In other news now, BTS has earned platinum certification from France's National Syndicate of Phonographic Publishing for its latest album, Arirang. The group's agency says the certification is awarded to albums that surpass the equivalent of 100,000 sales, including physical album sales and streaming. This marks BTS's 4th platinum-certified group album, with the latest milestone achieved about a month after its release. Its previous albums were acknowledged after about a year. And old is gold, and a flea market here in Seoul is serving to prove the popularity of these words of wisdom among the old and the young, given the question, why buy new when old will do? Our Chung Hye-rim was there.
Entering Dongmyo Flea Market in central Seoul, the atmosphere stands out. Vendors sell a wide range of goods, from vintage watches to used electronics. But the biggest draw is piles of secondhand clothing. Shoppers dig through them for shirts, trousers, and jackets, usually priced between 2,000 and 5,000 won, about $2 per item. This place was once considered an affordable clothing market for older generations, but the demographic has noticeably shifted in recent years.
I came here to relax after my school exams. I like the old vintage and retro vibe, and I'm hoping to buy a designer jacket today.
I heard Dongmyo is famous for its vintage items, so I came looking for some bracelets and rings.
For young people, Dongmyo has become more than just a place to shop. Spurred by social media posts and visits from K-pop stars, the area has evolved into a cultural landmark for experience consumption, the act of digging for your own personal finds.
My friends recommend this place. It's very cool. We bought a suitcase, a clothes, and a cap.
But the hunting for ground-level bargains isn't the only reason people come here.
Dongmyo not only has a variety of clothing, but is also famous for pieces that are timeless, such as limited edition brand clothes. And many shoppers come here to add these to their fashion collection.
This expanding multi-generational customer base is bringing a fresh wave of economic vitality to the local merchants.
We see teenagers as young as 15 to people in their early 20s as customers these days. But there are still many older folks, so people of all ages really come here. Sales were solid, but have increased since the weather has become warmer.
With its unique blend of history and modern fashion trends, Dongmyo continues to solidify its position as the center of South Korea's growing vintage market. 정혜림, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. Britain's King Charles and Queen Camilla arrived in Washington on Monday for a 4-day state visit, the first by a British monarch to the United States in 20 years. President Trump received the royal couple at the White House on Monday afternoon. The schedule includes a congressional address on Tuesday, a state dinner, and a visit to New York to honor the victims of the September 11th attacks. The visit comes as U.S.-UK relations are strained over disagreements on the Iran war, with Trump criticizing Britain for its lack of support for the U.S.-Israeli offensive. President Trump on Monday called for ABC to fire the late-night host Jimmy Kimmel after Kimmel made a joke about Melania ahead of the White House Correspondents' Dinner. In a parody segment last Thursday about the upcoming dinner, Kimmel said Melania, quote, had a glow like an expectant widow. A shooting at the dinner on Saturday led to a Secret Service agent being wounded. Melania on Monday called Kimmel's remarks, quote, corrosive, and urged ABC to take action. Trump called the joke far beyond acceptable and demanded Kimmel's immediate removal. ABC and Disney have not responded to requests for comment. Nearly 2,000 years after Mount Vesuvius buried the ancient Roman city of Pompeii, artificial intelligence is now rebuilding the face of one of its victims. Pompeii Archaeological Park released an image on Monday showing what a man found near one of the city's gates may have looked like in his final moments, crouching for cover as the volcano erupted. His remains were found alongside a terracotta bowl believed to have been his only shield against the falling debris. He was also carrying a lamp and 10 bronze coins, suggesting he was trying to flee when the eruption overtook him. Chu Ji-han, Arirang News.
Most of the rain has now tapered off, but we're still seeing a few showers across central regions. From this afternoon into the evening, Gangwon-do Province could see around 5 millimeters of rain. With the recent rain, some of the dry weather alerts have been lifted, but they're still in place for parts of Chungcheongdo, northern Jeollabuk-do, and Gyeongsang-Buk-do regions. So do stay cautious about fire risks. Tomorrow, Seoul will start the day at 8 degrees Celsius, Chuncheon at 6 degrees, Busan at 12 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 20 degrees, Daejeon at 20 degrees as well, Jeju at 16 degrees. Starting tomorrow, we'll be back to clear skies, with daytime highs climbing above 20 degrees. And that'll bring back noticeable day-to-night temperature swings. So now here's a look at the weather around the world.
Those are the headlines at the Star here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, and today we touch upon the unrest in the Middle East. Do stay with us, and thank you for now.
Hello, my name is Mark Kim. I'm a former member of the Virginia House of Delegates, and I want to congratulate the Arirang TV on your 30th anniversary. Thank you for the amazing work that you do to educate the Koreans as well as the Korean diaspora. People like me in the United States, we rely on you to tell us what's going on and to learn about what Korean Americans as well as Koreans should be thinking about every day. So thank you for the amazing service that you provide to all of us. And congratulations and happy anniversary.
Wow. Oh, this is a bidding. 에너지 들어가 있어요. 우와. 맛봐도 돼요? 와우. 와, 색깔이 조금 노란색이에요. 부드러워요. You see? Beautiful little octopus shape. Yes. Perfect. They're suck.
A new Iranian proposal to the U.S. reportedly offers to open the Strait of Hormuz if talks on Tehran's nuclear program are postponed. The proposal was reviewed by the Trump administration while Iran's top diplomat was in Russia. Hello and welcome. You're watching Press Perspective for this Tuesday, April 28th here in Seoul. I'm Min San-hee. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi sat down with Russian leader Vladimir Putin in Moscow on Monday for talks that reaffirm commitment to bilateral ties amid Tehran's confrontation with Washington. For more on this, I have Fabian Kretschmer with German press agency DPA here in the studio. Fabian, it's great to have you here.
Great to be back in the studio.
I also have Professor Che Hyun-jin at Kyung Hee University live on the line. Professor Che, it's lovely to have you on.
Great to be here.
Fabian, we start here in the studio. So as I mentioned, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi was in Moscow for talks with Putin on Monday. What has been disclosed about their discussions?
Yeah, actually, the Iranian top diplomat has had a big diplomatic tour that led him to Oman, to Pakistan, and now the last leg was to Russia. And actually, not much was published what was said, but I mean, both sides said that they had constructive talks. Both sides praised the strategic importance of the bilateral relationship. And Araghchi blamed the U.S. for the failed peace talks so far. That is not surprising. Now, why is he visiting the Russia? I think he wants to get Russia more involved in terms of further steps. I mean, it could be diplomatic to bring peace. I think that's Iranian preferred way to get an exit out of this war, albeit on their own terms. And also economically, Russia is important also for evading sanctions and all of that. But there could also be a further escalation of the war. I mean, there are some speculations that the US and Israel might mobilize troops and start escalating again. So I think even for that scenario, he would like to coordinate with Russia. And I think then if there could be further peace talks, Russia is interested in becoming more involved as a negotiator, as a mediator. And one key question so far why the peace talks have been stalled and even failed was the nuclear question. And I mean, this is unconfirmed. This is only my speculation. The US wants Iran to get rid of its enriched uranium. And that is so far not acceptable for Iran, but Iran might suggest that it would give its enriched uranium to a third country. And this third country could potentially be Russia. And I think for that is also important that both countries coordinate closely with each other.
Right. In the meantime, Professor Che, what are your thoughts on the timing of these latest talks in Moscow? I believe the last time Araghchi was in Moscow was about 10 months ago during heightened tensions after US strikes on Iran.
Yes, I think the timing is very important. This talk between Iran and Russia come right after the tension rose again. And the talk with Washington broke down once again. So the first goal of this meeting seems to managing the crisis. But secondly, the meeting also shows that Russia wants to tell the world it still has a role to play in the Middle East. And I think Moscow does not want to be excluded in this situation. It also wants to show that Russia has still some influence, not only in diplomacy, but also in global energy and security issue. And thirdly, and I think this meeting sends a broader political message to the entire world. So it may show the closer ties between Iran and Russia, but there's also important implication. And there is some growing alignment among countries such as Iran and Russia, some countries pushing back against American pressure. So some even may even see China in that picture. So as you just mentioned, this is not the first meeting between the two countries, not just during this crisis. We also saw similar meeting and contact last year. So this suggests that this is not a one-time event, but a part of a broader and trend in world politics. And I think the important part of this trend is the growing alignment among like-minded countries pushing back against American pressure.
Right, and speaking about world politics, Fabian, news website Politico says Trump's Iran showdown is becoming Europe's political nightmare. Is this the case for Germany, would you say?
Well, I found this was quite a fitting description, and I mean, it holds true to more or less all of Europe, but especially for Germany. I mean, just yesterday on Monday, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, he made some really remarkable statements. He said about the US that, you know, an entire nation is being humiliated by the Iranian leadership. And he basically also blamed the US that they don't have a convincing negotiation strategy. He also said the Iranians are obviously stronger than expected. And this comes all from a politician who always prided himself of being very pro-transatlantic and a very pro-US. But with Trump, I mean, things have changed. And why is it a political nightmare? Let me break this down. Trump started the war without informing the European Union. There was no coordination. So basically, he did it on his own terms and then expected Europe to bear the consequences and help out. So, for example, there were big dilemmas. How should Europe react? There are many US bases. And for the conflict in the Middle East, the US needs the air bases, for example, in Germany and in other European countries. And so basically, whether Europe wants or not, it is already involved in this conflict. And another question is also for the Strait of Hormuz. Europe is expected by the US to help out when it comes to securing the trade route. And you know, it's kind of interesting that most of the economic impact, actually, I mean, the US is also affected. I mean, every big economy is affected, but European countries more so, and especially Germany. It's an export-driven economy. It has a high manufacturing sector. It needs a lot of energy, and high energy prices are not good for the country. And also, if there should be like a big refugee or migration movement, I think they will go to Europe, and especially Germany, and not to the US, of course. So there is a dilemma that actually Europe is dissatisfied with the war. Germany is dissatisfied with the war. But can they criticize the US? Yeah, to a certain degree, but it comes with a price, because Germany and the European Union depend on the US for their security. They also want President Trump not to completely abandon Ukraine. So they have to find a middle way and kind of walk a fine line here, because there are conflicting interests. And let me just very briefly add that the US is also fed up with Europe. And from their point of view, I can understand it also a little bit, because they say, look, we have all those military bases in Europe, but really when we need to use them, we cannot even use them in some cases. And where are you when we need the NATO partners to secure the trade routes? So I think it is very complicated right now.
It really is complicated. And against this backdrop, Professor Che, CNN claims that Iran is suffering amid its standoff with the US, but that it might be betting that Mr. Trump will blink first. Now, this is according to the CNN article, of course. What do you believe are the prospects of this potential scenario of Mr. Trump blinking first, and what would be its broader implications?
Yeah, I read that article as well. And it seems to me that the CNN is describing the situation as something like chicken game, like the game of who blink first or who back down first. So I think Iran may hope the President Trump blink first, of course, but I would be very careful with that kind of view. And frankly, we should not take that CNN framing too far. This is much more complicated than that. So I see the situation more as a test of who can hold out longer. Of course, Iran may believe that the time could work in its favor, especially global oil price continue to rise, and also the domestic political pressure grow inside Washington. Okay. However, but President Trump may also believe that this America's economic and the military pressure can compel Iran to back down first. So let's imagine the situation. So what if the United States back down too early, or if Donald Trump blink first? I think that could carry huge domestic political costs for Donald Trump, especially with the midterm election coming in this November. And also, if Donald Trump blink first, and other U.S. rival countries such as North Korea, China, and Russia, and other, some rival country in the Middle East may draw very important lesson from this situation about how to compel America to back down. I think this could matter not only in the Middle East, but also in East Asia, including the Korean Peninsula. So based on this, general consideration, I would not assume President Trump is likely to blink first.
Right. All this, of course, purely speculation based on the article by CNN. Fabien, there are reports, of course, as I mentioned in the short clip ahead of our session, that a new proposal has been extended to the U.S. from Iran. What is known about this new peace proposal?
Yeah, I would call this a sincere peace proposal, but really not sure if the U.S. would agree on this. So basically it says, let's de-escalate first and then deal with the nuclear question later. Supposedly, Iran will offer to open the Strait of Hormuz, and then, of course, the U.S. would also open their sea blockade. And then the details about what to do with the nuclear program of Iran would be negotiated later. However, I mean, it's well known that Iran is very good at buying time, at making the sequence very smart in their terms, and then pushing back those really hard decisions. So would it be smart for the U.S. to agree on this? I would say it's relatively unrealistic, and Trump has already said, according to media reports, that he is not very happy with this suggestion. However, as Professor Chair mentioned, that the midterm elections are following, Trump has also domestic pressure, political pressure. The U.S. public is also not happy about high energy prices, and they see it at the gasoline station every day. And the real ripple-on effects of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, they really take effect only starting maybe these weeks, because the passage of the oil tankers takes several weeks. So what we've seen now was that already that oil has been delivered, that started to arrive or started to go out before the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. So the markets who have still performed relatively well, they have priced in the scenario that the Strait of Hormuz will reopen relatively shortly. But if that does not happen, then I think also the stock markets might show a very strong reaction, and that is really bad news for Donald Trump, because he is really under pressure by the U.S. consumers who expect a booming stock market.
Right. Professor Cha, I understand that this next question may be quite tough, but what do you envision happening with regard to the current showdown between the U.S. and Iran over the next few weeks, especially ahead of Mr. Trump's planned trip to Beijing to meet with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in May?
I think that maybe President Trump himself has no answer to this question. But in my thought, I think a full resolution in the near term is unlikely, unfortunately. The President Trump will likely want two things. The first one is clear abandonment, a complete abandonment of Iran's nuclear program, and transferring Iranian uranium to the United States. So he can show Iranian uranium to American people as a clear sign of a victory before the election. And secondly, the full reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. But think about it, from Iran's side, those two demands are very hard to accept. And especially on the nuclear side, the key decisions are not made by the Iranian president or foreign minister. So I think much depends on the decision made by Iran's military leaders, especially the Revolutionary Guard. And right now, it seems to me that those military leaders of Iran do not seem to willing to give up their nuclear program. So unfortunately, I do not see a comprehensive deal coming soon before the summit meeting with Xi Jinping. So my sense is that we may see a continued pressure and some limited diplomacy and a prolonged standoff rather than a full resolution between the two countries. And that's why I think the crisis is likely to continue for some time without a full solution.
Fabian, here on the Korean Peninsula this past weekend, North Korea's Kim Jong-un, he welcomed a Russian delegation, including Defense Minister Andrei Belousov. Could you tell us a bit about the purpose of that particular visit and its broader implications?
Yeah, I would say the last week was quite historic in terms of North Korea-Russia relations. I think at least 3 ministers were in the country, and among them also the defense minister. Why does this happen now? I mean, just 1 year ago, Russia celebrated what it calls the liberation of Kursk, the region between near to the border of Ukraine that is Russian, then was conquered by Ukraine and then reconquered by Russia with the help of a lot of North Korean soldiers. So the NIS, the Secret Service here in South Korea, is estimating that North Korea sent roughly 15,000 soldiers, also sent a lot of ammunition and artillery to help Russia in the war effort. And roughly 600 soldiers have died. That's only a guess. We don't know the official numbers. But now this kind of military collaboration seems to pay off for North Korea. So in the last week, North Korea-Russia Friendship Hospital was, the groundwork has been laid. The construction is starting. There's a border, like a bridge between Russia and North Korea under construction. And just on the weekend, the opening ceremony was held for the memorial for the fallen North Korean soldiers in the war in Ukraine. And both sides, the defense minister of Russia and Kim Jong-un, the ruler of North Korea, supposedly will agree to a 5-year plan in terms of military cooperation. And that is really formalizing. I mean, it's not really an alliance, but a quasi-alliance, I would say. And if they make plans for the next 5 years, that would show that probably there will be a lot of technology transfer, joint military drills and all this. So at least from the perspective of South Korea, I think this is also quite concerning to see that North Korea and Russia are getting really, really close.
Right. I wonder, Professor Che, do you suppose the Trump administration's current handling of Iran's nuclear weapons, nuclear program itself has emboldened perhaps North Korea with regard to its future interaction with the U.S.? And if that is the case, how should South Korea approach North Korea?
Yes, I think North Korea may get a very important lesson from this crisis. So as Pyongyang may conclude that countries facing American pressure become vulnerable if they do not have a strong and operational nuclear deterrent. And because of that, I think the chance of North Korea giving up its nuclear weapon has become even lower than before. And beyond keeping its current nuclear capability, I think North Korea may push even harder to build a stronger strategic capability, including nuclear submarine and also hypersonic ballistic missile, based on the cooperation with Russia. And I think that's why the strong deterrence through the Korea-US alliance has become even more important to maintain strategic stability in the Korean Peninsula. And at the same time, deterrence alone is not enough. The lowering tension and maintaining dialogue with Pyongyang is also important as well, because our ultimate goal is to prevent war in the Korean Peninsula. So I would say this crisis between Iran and the United States make both military deterrence and also dialogue and diplomacy more important than before.
Right, Professor Che, your words bring to mind a quote by a pundit who claimed if diplomacy is made impossible, then war becomes inevitable. On that note, I'll end today's talk. Professor Che, as always, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you very much.
And Fabian here in the studio, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. Right, on that note, we end Tuesday's edition of Press Perspective. We return same time tomorrow, that is Wednesday, with more panel discussion, and this time on tourism in South Korea. Do join us then.